Welcome everyone to History Gone Wilder, part of Half History Will Travel. I'm your host, the Wilder historian, Dr. Lucas Wilder, and I wanted to put together a fun video because I get questions about who were the best generals of the Civil War and who would you have in your army. So I decided to put together my own Civil War army. I'm treating this as though I was the army commander, so I will not be choosing an overall commander for this army, just its corps, division, and sometimes brigade commanders, and given the reasons for my choices. My army will consist of 4 corps. My first corps commander will be Winfield Hancock and his 2nd Corps of the Army of the Potomac. Hancock was superb, no pun intended. He was lightning fast and responded great in a crisis. For instance, at Gettysburg, he dispatched one of his divisions to the Union left to push back Confederates in the Wheatfield and Rose Woods. He helped stabilize the line during the devastating attacks by Longstreet's Corps. During the Overland Campaign, Grant relied on Hancock and his speed to outmaneuver Lee at every turn. As a corps commander, I don't think you'll find anyone better equipped to lead troops than Hancock. Now, which version of the 2nd Corps would I choose? I would choose a conglomeration of his division commanders. I would choose Francis Barlow, John Gibbon, and Alexander Hayes. Francis Barlow had been seriously wounded at Gettysburg on the knoll that bears his name, Barlow's Knoll. Left for dead, he returned to the Union Army and won over Hancock for being a fearless fighter on the battlefield. John Gibbon was a grizzled veteran of the Army of the Potomac, having at one point led the Iron Brigade. His stubborn stands on multiple battlefields makes him one of the best defensive generals in that army. Although Gibbon had trouble during the siege of Petersburg, and him and Hancock began to ruffle each other's feathers, I would still want Gibbon on my side. Alexander Hayes would hold a division command under Hancock for just a short amount of time, but it was during the Gettysburg campaign, where he helped defend against Pickett's charge. He's also known as one of the best fighters in the Union Army, and he would get killed at the Battle of the Wilderness, but I would still want Alexander Hayes on my side. Having Hancock at the head of a corps of men would provide a great foundation for any army. My next pick will probably be controversial, but let me explain my thoughts. My next corps commander would be Confederate Lieutenant General William J. Hardee. Hardee literally wrote the book on light infantry tactics and drill. While he was in the Army of Tennessee, he performed great service and worked well with his subordinates, one of which being Patrick Cleburne. Although there's not a big moment in his military career to point to, Hardee was a dependable and reliable commander, something an army commander needs. Plus, his interactions with his subordinates makes him a needed force in an army. I would keep one of his divisions, that under Patrick Cleburne. If anyone wonders why Cleburne is touted as such a great general, look no further than the Battle of Stone's River and the Battle of Ringgold Gap. I've animated both of those, and if you don't come away from those videos exclaiming that Cleburne may be the best division commander on either side of the war, then I'm not sure what could convince you. He managed his brigade superbly and worked well with Hardee. To help Hardee and his corps, I would actually bring in a Union division commander who was a tough fighter, James Steedman. It was Steedman who was part of the Reserve Corps at Chickamauga, who occupied the far right flank of the Union troops on Horseshoe Ridge. Like Cleburne, he remained at the front of the fighting with his men and coordinated his brigades beautifully to get the best effect. Steedman would match well with Cleburne, as both were hard fighters and could attack or defend. The 3rd Division commander I would choose would be a man who stayed a brigade commander for the majority of the war, but would attain division command late in the war. His name was George Maney, most notable for commanding the 1st Tennessee Infantry Regiment, the unit that Sam Watkins of Company H was a part of, and then commanded it as a brigade commander through much of the war. He would finally get to command a division on the Atlanta campaign, but would be captured. He, like Cleburne and Steedman, were hard fighters who could attack or defend, and most importantly, knew how to coordinate their units in battle. When other divisions lost cohesion, all 3 of these men demonstrated great ability in keeping their units together during a battle. Another one of my corps commanders would be the Rock of Chickamauga, George Thomas. It's no secret that he is one of my all-time favorite Civil War generals. On 2 separate occasions, he saved the Army of the Cumberland from disaster. The first time was at Stone's River, where he organized the retreating Union troops in the defense of the Nashville Pike. The other time earned him the name the Rock of Chickamauga. Thomas got criticized by Grant as moving too slow, But Thomas moved when he believed his troops were ready, and when he did move, he did so with authority and purpose. As an Army commander, he helped coordinate William T. Sherman's movements during the Atlanta campaign. However, Sherman dismissed many of Thomas's suggestions, which led to a couple of missteps on the part of Sherman. At the Battle of Nashville, Thomas was also criticized with being slow by Grant, but when Thomas did launch the attack against the Confederate works, he soundly defeated them. I would change Thomas's corps structure quite a bit. His corps consisted of 4 divisions at Chickamauga, commanded by Absalom Baird, James Negley, Joseph Reynolds, and John Brannan. I would only keep Absalom Baird. Reynolds never displayed any great service, Brannan because I don't think he spent enough time as division commander to warrant him a place here, and Negley seemed to be too cautious as a commander, and although caution can help a general, in his case, it hurt him on the battlefield. Absalom Baird was a dependable commander, who when asked to perform a task, he did so with the best of his abilities. Early in the Civil War, he helped capture the Cumberland Gap, then would be transferred to the Army of the Cumberland. At Chickamauga, he held the Union left flank under Thomas. During the battles for Chattanooga, he performed exemplary service in capturing Missionary Ridge, and during the Atlanta campaign, he would be awarded the Medal of Honor for his deeds. His ability to command troops led to many Union successes, and that's why he deserves to be part of this army. I would give Thomas's corps Philip Sheridan's division. Most of us have heard of Philip Sheridan for his exploits in Virginia in 1864, but he performed great service in the West. At Stone's River, it was his troops that held out in the slaughter pen. At Chickamauga, when the Union line broke, he was able to organize his brigades to slow down Longstreet's attack, although did not stop it. At Chattanooga, his troops helped capture Missionary Ridge, and it was Sheridan's men who attempted to pursue the retreating Confederates. He was an able commander, and one that deserves to be under Thomas. This is the only time on this list that I'm going to do this, but I'm going to break down a division into what brigades I would want in it. I would make John A. Logan a division commander under Thomas. Logan is little known to casual readers of the Civil War, but it was Logan whom Ulysses S. Grant wanted to replace Thomas with at Nashville. That speaks to his ability and the faith that his superiors had in him. Logan was a hard fighter and a dependable man. He was a political appointee, but quickly dispelled the stereotype of a politician who couldn't command troops. However, I wouldn't use his division he commanded at Vicksburg. I would start a different division, one made up of brigades under William B. Hazen, John Turchin, and August Willock. These 3 brigade commanders were like the special forces of the Army of the Cumberland, determined individuals who commanded their troops well and would be feared on the battlefield. Now, the time has arrived for my last corps. Although it may be controversial, and most people would probably choose Stonewall Jackson as a corps commander, I would go with A.P. Hill as my last corps commander. I thought about making him a division commander in Hardee's corps with Claiborne and Maney, but I chose not to. For one, Jackson couldn't get along with his subordinates. A.P. Hill in general did. That means a lot to an army, especially if you're trying to keep cohesion and not have infighting. If you want to see what happens to an army with infighting, just look at the Army of Tennessee after Chickamauga. If you want to know why I chose A.P. Hill over Jackson, I have a great video entitled Who Was Better, A.P. Hill or Stonewall Jackson? I outline my reasons in that video. Suffice it to say, I chose A.P. Hill for his quickness, similar to Hancock, and for his actions around Petersburg. When Hill achieved corps command right before the Gettysburg campaign, the next few months would be a learning experience. His performance wasn't great at Gettysburg, but that was mainly because he had no direction on the second and third day, and part of his command was given temporarily to Longstreet for the attacks. At Bristoe Station, he made a big mistake and fell into a trap, but after that, 1864 was a stellar year for Hill. He doggedly held on at the Wilderness, quickly maneuvered his corps to block Grant at key locations, and at the defenses of Petersburg, he caused the Union High Command multiple headaches by thwarting their attempts to get around his flank. He may have had a rocky start, but I would have faith in him as a commander. One of his division commanders would be William Dorsey Pender. Pender was seriously wounded at Gettysburg and later would die. He didn't have a long tenure as a division commander, but his actions as a brigade commander and his toughness makes me want to give him a division command in A.P. Hill's corps. Hill and others had a lot of faith in him, and he didn't let them down. William Mahone would be next. Although a small man, he fought hard, and like Claiborne and other division commanders on this list, he coordinated his division properly. He worked well with Hill in many battles, including the Wilderness, the entire Overland Campaign, and during the Siege of Petersburg. The 3rd and final division commander in Hill's corps never served under Hill, but was known for his toughness and his initiative. John B. Gordon. Gordon was a Georgian who worked his way up the ranks in the Confederate Army and finally would attain corps command, commanding Robert E. Lee's 2nd Corps in the Army of Northern Virginia by the end of the conflict. He was another man, and I know this may sound like a broken record, but he could coordinate his brigades well, and that is one of the biggest difference makers. When I started this list, I thought I would end the video here, but I thought I would add a cavalry corps. To command the cavalry corps, I would choose Jeb Stuart. Now, I know many of you would disagree with me on this, but when it comes to giving an army commander good intelligence of the enemy's whereabouts, there was no one better than Jeb Stuart. He was a big factor in Lee's successes. I would give him 2 divisions. One would be commanded by Nathan Bedford Forrest. The reason I wouldn't put Forrest as the commander of the cavalry is because he did some of his best service as a raider, and Stuart knew how and when to launch raids. Forrest would be an invaluable resource for Stuart, but I think Stuart would guide Forrest to gain proper intelligence from the enemy, something Forrest could do and do well, but his main attribute was as a raider and even tackling infantry when needed. The other division of cavalry under Stuart would be commanded by Union Brigadier General Samuel Carter. He was from East Tennessee and would join the Union during the Civil War, having served in the Navy before that. He would help capture the Cumberland Gap in 1862, and he would also help Ambrose Burnside invade East Tennessee in 1863. His time as a cavalry commander or mounted forces was superb. He could lead his men well, and his men liked him. He got along with just about everybody, and he was an exceptional human being. His raids into East Tennessee caused destruction and confusion as Confederate forces tried to find where he was, and he was always just out of reach. He was an awesome cavalry commander, and I would love to have him in this army. What do you think of the army I assembled? Who would you choose? Let me know in the comments below.